Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to be here again to talk to you about Phase 4A. This is pretty much a reminder, I hope, for most of you. The launch is coming up and we need to be prepared with our ground stations. My name is Michael Fletcher, OH2AUE, OH2FM, OH2BTZ, etc., etc. And Phase 4A, as you, at least those who are familiar with rigging to satellites, recognize that P followed by a number designates the orbit, the type of the spacecraft's orbit, and P4 is a geostationary orbit. After looking for a launch for many years for P4A, with not so much success, something quite extraordinary happened in the previous half a few years back, where the Qatar satellite company came to visit the AMSAT-DL stand, and discussions started with these guys on the possibility of supporting an amateur satellite transponder hosted launch. So going back to around 2013, we had a very small group from AMSAT-DL, AMSAT-OH and AMSAT-UK, just a few people. And after several negotiations by AMSAT-DL, we had a first meeting with the Qatari satellite company and the Qatar Amateur Radio Society. Here we have G3VZV, for those who might know him, DB2OS, chairman of AMSAT-DL, A71BP from the Qatar Amateur Radio Society, myself and G6LVB. You might have spotted Dilbert, there's a Dilbert engineer in this photograph. There's some slides here that I've taken from the ITU presentation that was given at the microsatellite presentation last year. Just to give you an overview and recap. So these slides cover the SHALSAT-2. The Qatari satellite company already have SHALSAT-1 up there, and it's a useful satellite to experiment with if you want to test your receiving microwave equipment on 10 gigahertz. But going through some of the requirements, the transponder and the frequency allocation, including polarization and some other technical information on what the solution is. So what we have here is we're looking at two hosted transponders on SHALSAT-2, and from the orbital position we have complete coverage with the single beam. The antenna is specifically designed to cover the visible part of the Earth. So when we started off, the high-level requirements for such transponders were that it should be operable over the visible Earth and at a reasonable elevation. Basically looking at the specifications, how to support about 100 users simultaneously on the transponder, the linear transponder, and to have decent sized, not too large dishes on the uplink and downlink. So already from the beginning we specified the sensitivity of the receiver per user. And the second transponder is a transponder that's specifically designed to support digital television, but also other digital modes. The major differences are that it's wider bandwidth and it doesn't have any automatic level gain control. This is a plot of the visible Earth from the position of the satellite that will be located at 26 degrees east. So it's pretty ideal from the Finnish point of view and not too bad for the other Nordic countries. It will allow very long communication paths from the eastern part of South America to Asia. So basically, what we're looking at is support of quite a number of users on the linear transponder, being about 200 kilohertz wide, and several digital video carriers on the 8 megahertz wide transponder. This is essentially a transponder that has been specified by radio amateurs, and this being, or has been produced commercially. So it's a very special, unique solution that we're looking at. And for the commercial reasons, there's not much I can say about the transponder itself, the technical solutions that have been implemented there, but we can look at the block diagrams and look at some of the main features. But this is really something completely new to the radio amateur community. And you can imagine having a transponder up there at a fixed geolocation, which is on 24 hours a day, allows a lot of interesting new radio amateur communications possibilities. Initially we're looking at L-band, S-band, L-band uplink and S-band downlink combination requirements, and of course everybody knows that working on 2.4 gigahertz is quite painful nowadays with all the ISM band traffic and wireless LAN and Bluetooth and microwave ovens, and some countries even have radar, and so that's quite challenging, and it was quite easy to further our development to look at the possibility of having S-band uplink and X-band downlink, so 2.4 gigahertz on the uplink and 10 gigahertz on the downlink. Both transponders have been designed and produced to work in this way. Even here at the meeting, you can see at the jumble cell, the boot cell, there are a lot of amplifiers available for 2 gigahertz or 2.4. It's generally quite easy to get some decent power on 2.4 gigahertz, 10 or 20 watts is not a big deal and doesn't cost much. And then from the receiver point of view, there are a lot of possibilities. Of course, the existing, those of you that already built equipment for Phase 3D, Oscar 40, that same receiver can be used also on P4A. But also there are a lot of other surplus crystal control or crystal control synthesized converters from the SATCOM industry that can be used directly or modified. And I think the easiest and cheapest way to get at this with these new mass-produced, really simple but PLL-locked LMBs available, especially from eBay. I have a couple of slides on those further on. So the uplink band is somewhere in the 2.4 gigahertz range and the downlink on 10.5 gigahertz, and that's the top end of the satellite allocation. And the reason for that is that we want to be able to have decent receiver sensitivity from more or less unmodified satellite LMBs. That's why aiming for the top edge of the band. Most commercial LMBs go down to 10.75 gigahertz and some go down to 10.6. And the frequency responses are not that sharp, so dropping down to 10.5 is quite reasonable, looking at the numbers. So the two transponders, there's a narrowband transponder, which is 250 kilohertz wide, and both transponder uplinks are right-hand circular polarized, following the old convention. Right-hand circular polarized for the 2.4 gigahertz uplink. And the downlinks for the X-band, for the narrowband, 10 gigahertz downlink, is centered around 10.489.675 and linear vertically polarized. So the downlink is vertically polarized linear. For the narrowband transponder and for the wideband transponder, it's horizontally polarized linear. So what this allows you to do is that you actually receive both transponders with a suitable front end simultaneously. Both transponders can be on simultaneously. The downlink center frequency is 10.495 plus minus 4 megahertz, so it's an 8 megahertz wide transponder that can support several very high quality video channels simultaneously. Now, in satellite communications, when you look at the link budget, it's quite simple. You have the EIRP from the satellite downlink, for example, then you have the path loss, and you have all the miscellaneous losses, and you have your receiver sensitivity and antenna size. The way operators of SATCOM equipment want to make things easy is that they specify the transmitter end of the link EIRP, so the radiated effective isotropic power. That's the output power plus the antenna gain. And for the receive side, they specify G over T, which is a figure of merit. It's the receiver antenna gain divided by the noise temperature of the antenna system. And in this way, to make very simple, rapid, coarse link budget measurements, all you need to do is subtract the path loss from the transmit EIRP and plug in the G over T, and then you have your carrier to noise ratio. So it makes the link budget calculation sort of mentally very easy to do. In practice, it's far more complicated. You have cross-polarization isolation, you have interference from neighboring transponders, you have interference from neighboring carriers, you have range attenuation, polarization attenuation due to other reasons. All these figures need to be plugged in if you want to do sub-dB calculations of the carrier to noise ratio. But using the G over T and the EIRP and your calculated path loss, which of course is fixed for a geostationary satellite, you can easily make coarse mental calculations on what size dish you need on receive, for example, and what sort of noise figure you can live with. And that's what all this G over T and EIRP stuff is about. There's a lot of this information on the internet. If it's new to you, you still have some few months to work out the details. While on the subject, I'll say that the launch is now planned for Q1 2017. I hope it's not going to be any later than that, because we want to be before the American P4A launch, which is also something that's coming up. Well, in this project there have been a lot of in-depth discussions between professionals and amateur radio freaks on various figures and how to work out the numbers. AGC and ALC is a very strange definition of level control for professionals. And defining linearity is also something that's very different in the satellite world. Professional satellite operators and operators of other very high power transmitter equipment, they talk about noise power ratio. We amateurs talk very easily about two-tone IND, for example, when we're defining linearity. We have a simple two-carrier exciter source, and then we look at the intermodulation distortion products of that. But that's a very, very lightweight measurement for linearity. For a high-power wideband amplifier that's filled with traffic, needs much more stressing test signal. The noise power ratio measurement is such a measurement. So working out all these figures so that we're all talking about the same thing took quite a while. But we're now in the phase where the satellite is integrated by the satellite's provider. It's Mitsubishi Electric Company. Melco is the provider, is the selected vendor for the satellite. And the transponders themselves have already been flight tested, integrated and tested, and are ready to go as we speak. And currently there's work going on setting up the monitor and control station in Qatar. A couple of points to note. The narrowband transponder has AGC, like our other transponders usually do have. We have some transponders in the past on amateur satellite equipment that doesn't have AGC, but basically they all do have AGC. And the attack time and the decay time is also something that was a huge discussion again with the professionals, what this actually means and how it's defined. But we understand this, of course, when we think of AGC for SSB, how it has to work. And for the wideband transponder, there's no AGC, there's no ALC. There's a level control of the traveling wave tube amplifier input, which is related to the linearization of the tube. So it's an integral function to the TWTA, and it has nothing to do with the traffic load itself from our point of view. So what you put in, you get out. I don't know if you can see the block diagram very well in the back. Can you see the block diagram, the top part? We have the S-band receiver antenna, which is right-hand circularly polarized, and the signal is filtered. And in this diagram here, we still have the option that this actually would have been provided with switches, and I'm not entirely sure what the situation is now. Can the transponders actually be switched on simultaneously, or will they be switched? That's something I'm not entirely sure of. My understanding is that it's currently, actually if you look at the lower block diagram, you can see here that here at the top we have switches, and here at the bottom we have a hybrid splitter. Yes, okay, so the actual transponders are these modules here. And in this drawing you can see the splitters to the, sorry, I need to recap. These are the preamplifiers, so it's a redundant preamplifier that we're looking at here. We have two preamplifiers that can be switched, hot switched. So the reason for the input and output coaxial switches here for the redundant preamplifiers. And these lines here are actually supposed to go to this part further down, where we have the narrow band and wideband paths. So we have here the amplifier chains, the filtering, and the OMT to combine the vertical and horizontal simultaneously. And this is the module that's completely specified for satellite use, and these are completely commercial, identical components to what the spacecraft is carrying for its normal broadcasting traffic. Looking quickly at the link budget, if, for example, on the downlink, for the figures that we know for the satellite, for the geometry, for the sensitivity of the satellite, if we have a 75 centimeter dish and 10 watts on 2.4 gigahertz uplinking, then we'll end up with about 22 dB signal to noise or carrier to noise ratio PEP for a single user. And this is assuming full loading of the transponder. So all operators up there simultaneously. And on the downlink, for this carrier to noise ratio, on the downlink, if we're running 100 watts from the TWTA, is that a lot or what? Is that plenty?
Yes.
More or less? That's 100 watts from the TWTA, plus minus. And this is running the TWTA at a 6 dB back off, and this is something that can be programmed by the satellite provider. But with these figures, we end up at a downlink carrier to noise ratio of 15.4 dBs for each user. So they're very impressive numbers. And in this case, using I think this is using the same dish. I need to remember. The geometry is 14 dB per Kelvin, so it's using the same dish size on the downlink. The transmit antenna on the satellite is 17 dBi in gain. The 17 dBi comes from the necessity of the antenna beam width to cover the whole visible Earth.
How much power do you have available from the solar panels?
Oh, that it's huge. I mean, we're talking about a commercial satellite with many tens of amplifiers. So the solar power source is not a limitation of any kind, or thermal issues. There's no such issue at all related to the AMSAT. The AMSAT transponder is really one of the smallest power consuming devices on board.
So it's planned to be 24/7 operation?
Yes. It's like 20 meters, the day round. You can imagine some interesting stuff that you can do there with a continuous link. Just some theoretical plots here. What you can do with linearization of the TWTA. So, in this case, running the amplifier at 4 dB output back off. That means going to compression and coming back 4 dBs. It's quite typical to have 5, 6 or 7 dBs back off in a TWTA to get it into a reasonably linear operating mode. Pushing it up to 4 dBs from output back off without a linearizer, our IMD level would be 5, 10, 15, 17 dBs in this plot. And then switching in the linearizer, we get down 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 33 dBs. So the improvement is drastic. This means that we can get a few more dBs output power from the amplifier. And this is something that's done on all the transponder TWTAs on the spacecraft and all spacecraft for broadcasting. Now I think here at the meeting this weekend you've probably seen these octagon Oslo PLL LNBs. Several people have had these for demonstrating, and they're really cheap, sort of like from 5 to 15 euros each. They're crystal controlled, they're PLL locked, they have vertical and horizontal polarization, and the typical voltage rays for switching between polarizations. And without any kind of modification whatsoever, this LNB is quite suitable for using on the spacecraft. This is probably the cheapest way to get a receiver on X-band. It's not the best by far, but it's the cheapest. And I think the first drawback that you'll see is the temperature dependence. There's the slight frequency instability because the crystal in the reference itself is a very cheap PC type, low profile, low quality crystal. Then again, if you want to make this better, you can replace the crystal oscillator with a better one or build a PLL for it. Some have done that too. But I think outside in the original enclosure, the variation is, it is entirely capable and suitable for SSB and CW. But some of you might want to improve that, especially for digital communication. There's an experiment they made a while ago with a 150 centimeter offset dish. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to dig out that all commercial satellites also have beacons. I don't know if you've realized this, but when you look at a commercial satellite that's relaying TV transmissions or whatever, they always have a beacon on one of the polarizations and sometimes on both polarizations. And to dig out this beacon from the noise is a good measure of your capability on the receiver and the dish pointing. A typical beacon EIRP is somewhere between maybe 5 or 10 watts. So they're low power beacons and they're weak signal sources, and they're very good to experiment with if you don't have anything else up there yet. And of course this is 11 gigahertz, so I need to have an IF receiver that'll tune up and to that frequency and allow me to receive the signal. In this case the IF was 1.45 gigahertz. But here you can see the pass bands of 2 transponders. There's no traffic on there, and the beacon is there in between. And the reason why I made this test is that I just wanted to simply listen to the carrier to get an idea of the stability of the PLL. And it's quite reasonable for SSB. It's certainly crystal controlled, but we have the drifting because of the poor quality of the reference. The second thing that I did was I made some very simple cold sky, warmer but not so warm winter ground in Finland, just to make a reference at different frequencies. So the top measurement, you can't see the graph there, but I'm looking at the hot to cold antenna noise temperature at 11,250, 10,470 and 10,368. And these are the numbers that you want to look at. So the cold sky, hot ground is 4.1 dBs at 11,250 within the specified band. Then going down to 10,470, it's decreased to 3.2, but still at 10.368, it's still 2.8 dBs. So it's really not that bad compared to the design frequency, just over a dB. in sensitivity. So, some photographs of what other PLL LMBs look like if you see them on the flea market. They must have the text indicating that they are PLL locked. If there's no indication or any marking on the LMB that it's PLL controlled, it certainly will not be controlled by a crystal PLL circuit, and it won't be useful for SSBCW, but it might be okay. It might just be okay for the digital TV transmission. Those that want to start building their TV transmitter for P4A, there's a commercial version out there. I'm just bringing up example. I have no relation myself with Stefan Wyman and his company, but this is a device that I've been using now for over 10 years. This is a very nice modulator that can take in 4 transport streams and build a multiplex from those. It's not cheap, but it's very high quality. Now, the easier way perhaps to generate a DVB transport stream is to look at the broadcasting auctions and so on, and there you have MPEG-2 encoders and modulators, and some of them are really cheap and entirely usable here, of course. This is just one example. From the receiver point of view, you need, of course, a demodulator on the receive side. You need to work up the numbers of frequencies and so on. But there are many cheap DVB receivers that you can use directly, or if you want to do some homebrewing, I know OH2LH at least has some demodulator and decoder cards for sale at the Jumble sell cheaply, and they work nicely. Also, I've built a couple myself. Serial port configuration and quite suitable for DVB-S or the PSK demodulation. DVB-S2, which is the newer standard, supports 8 PSK and even higher modulations, 16 APSK and so on. But QPSK is probably the easiest way to start, and then HPSK for narrow emissions, the same capacity. Also, I spent some time on making some emulations in the lab on how the transponder loading would look like. We have to remember that the wideband transponder has no HEC, has no ALC. Now this means that radioamateurs will have to learn the professional way of operating on the satellite. You have to be able to see your own downlink. You have to be able to see the transponder, you have to see the traffic on the transponder downlink, and you have to uplink, increasing your power from the noise level up until you're at the same level as the other traffic. You can't just crank up your power and turn on your transmitter because you'll overload the transponder and all the other signals will go down and you'll create a lot of distortion and so on. So this is something that you have to be very careful with, and you always have to have the possibility in some way to see the transponder downlink before you uplink on the wideband transponder. Now, there is work going on as we speak between AMSAT DL and AMSAT UK on supplying the transponder with some interesting functionality from the ground. So on board, there's no satellite, there's no beacon on the transponder, and there's no Layla, for example. Leistungslimit-Anzeige from the AMSAT Oscar 40, this police beacon that seeks out the overloading signals and marks them with this wailing siren. This is going to be done on the ground. So there are two kinds of beacons in commercial satellites. You have beacons that are on board on the spacecraft, and then you have beacons that are uplinked. And an uplink beacon is called a pseudo beacon. And that's what we're doing with P4A. We're uplinking the beacon from Qatar. And the beacon will carry, hopefully, at least 400 bits per second BPSK. And it'll actually carry some transponder parameters in the modulation. So we'll be supplied with some data that's interesting for the AMSAT community, and it'll be downlinked on the beacon. And of course, the main purpose of the beacon is identification of the carrier and signals. So what I did was I put together 3 satellite modems, combined them, and added a beacon signal to understand the loading capabilities and what happens, especially with the beacon, and what the beacon level should be, and where the beacon should be located in order to be compatible with with several other requirements actually. This is the worst case scenario where the beacon is on the top side, it's at the top edge of the band. And you can see that when we have one carrier only, the green trace and the beacon, you can see that the intermodulation distortion, the Bart's head,